In this video, I'll be taking a look at a pair of Blaze Atari licensed retro handheld consoles. So let's take a look at the first console now. This is the 50 game version, which I think is a slightly older model. It comes in a nice solid feeling box, just put that to one side. You can see they've gone for a kind of woody kind of effect on the plastic, which is presumably to match the look of some of the old Ataris. So it takes 4 AAA batteries, so let me just grab a few of those and then we'll be able to give it a test. So let's just turn it on. Okay, so I think we can see what the problem is with this one. Of course, I can't really test any further than this because of the broken screen, but it does power on at least. So on to the next one, and this one is advertised as having an SD slot, which I don't think was present on the previous model. The box is certainly not as nice for this one as for the other console, but the console itself does look to be pretty much identical at first glance. I'll just put the batteries in this one and give it a quick test. Right, so this one doesn't seem to have any power at all, no signs of life. Just give it a few more goes just to see if it'll come to life. No, it doesn't look like it. So I think now I'm going to get the first one opened up and take a look at that screen. So now we've got this one open and we can see the markings on the screen. I'm just going to get the other console opened up and see if that one has the same type of screen as this one. We don't know if that screen works, but it's worth a try if it's the same type. Now I've got them both open, it'll be interesting just to have a quick look at the differences between the two boards. So they do look fairly similar, they both look to be using the same CPU, but we can see on console 1 we've got this micro USB port on the outside, and in console 2 that's where the micro SD slot's located. It does look like there's pads in console 1 for a micro SD slot on the inside of the board, and that's where we find the micro USB on the second board, so it looks like they've just swapped those two ports around pretty much. I'm not sure what, if anything, that micro USB port can be used for. That might be something I'll look into in the future. The good news is they both seem to be using the same model of screen, so let's get the screen out of that second console and put it into the first one and see if it works. I've just got the two boards out of the cases now, and just having a look at them, you can see that although they do use the same screen, they are connected slightly differently. The one folds over and is connected on the back, and the other one's connected on the front. Now that shouldn't make too much difference, we've just got to be careful to make sure that we put each screen in correctly so that it will fit back in the case. So I'm just going to start gently heating these pads one by one. I'm going to start with this edge over here, and I'm just going to gently lift the flexible board that's connected to the screen as I'm going along, and it should, once you've got the first couple off, hopefully it'll start coming up quite easily. You have to be careful not to try and force these up, because otherwise if you pull the pads off that's going to be a much more difficult repair. So you have to make sure you get plenty of heat in there first before you start trying to lift the flexible PCB up. You can see they're starting to come up a lot easier now the first few have been lifted. So it looks like we've hit a ground pin here, so just to make this one a bit easier, I'm just going to add a bit of fresh solder to the end of the iron and onto the connection, and that should make it come up a bit more easily. New solder will just help with the heat transfer to get the heat onto that pad a little bit more efficiently. And we can see that one's lifted now, so just got these last few to do, and then we'll be able to put the screen to one side and move on to the other board. So with this one removed, I'll do the same thing for the other board, and then we can start looking at reattaching the screens. Just given the pads a little bit of a clean, and I've added some fresh solder onto there, which should help us later on when we're trying to put the new screen on. Looks like there's a bit of corrosion on one of the pads, but other than that, the pads all look in good shape. Here I've got the first board that we looked at, the one that originally had the broken screen, and this is a screen from the second board, which hopefully is going to work in this board. Of course we couldn't test it in the other one because it had no power at all. I'm just going to start by tacking down a couple of these pins. That'll just hold the screen in place so I don't have to hold it anymore, which will just make it a little bit easier when trying to get all the pins connected. Now that the screen's held in place, I'm just going to use a pair of tweezers just to apply a bit of pressure next to the pads as I'm soldering them, and I'm just going to reflow each pin as we did before really when we were removing the screen. We just want to make sure that there's a nice strong connection on each pin. It should be good to go now, but I'm just going to go over them again with a little bit of fresh solder just to make sure they're really secure and we've got some nice clean shiny joints. So that all looks good now, so let's get it back in the case and give it a test. I've already got batteries in the back half of this shell, so now this is plugged in. Let's give it a go, see what happens. Yes, there we go. So now we can see that that's working fine. I'm going to put it all back together and give it a proper test. Right, so what game should we test out? Let's have a go at bowling, why not? And it's not going to win any Game of the Year awards, that's for sure. But it does seem to be fully functional at least, so that's one down. Now let's take a look at the other one. So I've just repeated that process, putting the damaged screen into the second console, and I've just decided to test it out again, and after a few seconds it has actually powered on, which is it's different to what it did before, but we've got a strange flickering power light. So it looks as though there's some kind of power issue in there somewhere. If I had to guess, I'd probably say it's something capacitor related. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find any documentation or anything on the internet about this board, and that makes it a lot more tricky to diagnose these kind of issues. I was hoping that the two boards would be exactly the same, then you'd be able to do some comparisons between the two, but that turned out not to be the case. Of course, this one will, if we manage to get it working at all, it will need a new screen, but we could see when this broken screen was attached to the old board, it did have some dark patches on it. There was a black section across the bottom, so there was some sign that it was actually booting up. But this one doesn't even seem to be getting that far. So for now I'm going to call this one unfixable, and hopefully I'll come back to it at some point in the future. Right, come on, this is the one. First attempt, let's go. Yes, look at that. Too easy. So I hope you liked this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you'll stick around for the next one.